In 2016, a grainy video surfaced online, a haunting glimpse into an experiment from half a century ago. In it, a man in a white coat places a cat inside a transparent container with 2 mice. The scene begins as nature intended. The cat stalks its prey and strikes with precision. But then, something inexplicable occurs. The cat's primal instincts seem to reverse entirely. It leaps wildly, retreating from the mice as though terrified of them. This strange footage barely scratches the surface of a much darker legacy. Decades before this video surfaced, dozens of unsuspecting civilians endured far more invasive experiments under MKUltra, the CIA's secretive mind control program, a mission so unethical that most records of its existence were destroyed. Still, through the few documents that remain, we can glean some of its horrors. Exposed. On December 22, 1974, a disturbing headline dominated the front page of the New York Times Sunday edition, stating, quote, "Huge CIA operation reported in U.S. against anti-war forces, other dissidents in Nixon years." The nation, already shaken by the unraveling Watergate scandal, was rocked further by investigative journalist Seymour Hersh's explosive revelations. Hersh, one of the era's most prominent reporters, exposed the CIA's violations, detailing illegal activities that included wiretapping private citizens, intercepting mail, and embedding agents to infiltrate anti-war movements. Americans were horrified to learn their own intelligence agency had begun treating its citizens like enemy combatants. Congressional inquiries followed, uncovering layers of government overreach. Yet, as shocking as Hersh's expose was, it barely scratched the surface. Behind the scenes, panic consumed the CIA. Fearing exposure of their darkest secrets, Director Richard Helms ordered the destruction of classified records. Files were destroyed, evidence of countless covert operations erased forever. But a single misfiled batch of documents survived the purge, leaving a trail that would unravel one of the most sinister chapters in U.S. intelligence history. What emerged from these surviving documents was far more insidious than domestic surveillance. Hidden in the shadows was a program of unimaginable cruelty, MKUltra. This clandestine project, spanning decades, sought to achieve mastery over the human mind. The surviving files revealed an intricate web of experimentation involving powerful hallucinogens, sensory deprivation, and psychological manipulation. Prisoners, psychiatric patients, and everyday citizens served as the test subjects, none agreeing or even knowing what the government was doing to them. The battle for the mind. The origins of these experiments trace back to the aftermath of the Korean War. Returning prisoners of war, once proud defenders of their country, seemed to have turned into entirely different men. They came home preaching communist ideologies, denouncing the U.S. government, and praising the very regimes they had fought against. This eerie transformation left American officials terrified and trying to understand how trained soldiers had been reprogrammed. The answer seemed to be psychological manipulation. The CIA began to consider that a new type of warfare was being developed by the communist bloc, a battle to conquer the human mind. Determined to counter this threat, the CIA launched Project MKUltra in 1953. At its helm was Sidney Gottlieb, a chemist and spy master who had come to be known as the Poisoner-in-Chief. The agency spared no expense in its pursuit of mind control, pouring an estimated $25 million into the project, equivalent to roughly $250 million today. More than 80 institutions, from prestigious universities to hospitals, were covertly recruited through funding from organizations. In the name of scientific progress, MKUltra delved into this dark experiment. Test subjects, often unaware of their participation, were subjected to grueling trials that ranged from sensory deprivation to invasive brain implants. Many of these experiments were disguised as treatments for mental health issues, but were in reality trials to observe how the human mind can be manipulated, broken, and reprogrammed. Truth serum. LSD quickly became a cornerstone of MKUltra's experiments, a substance the CIA believed could act as both a truth serum and an agent of mind control. The agency began its experiments by secretly dosing civilians in public spaces, observing their reactions as they embarked on vivid, disorienting trips. One of the program's most infamous operations involved hiring sex workers to lure men into hotel rooms. Once inside, The unsuspecting targets were administered with LSD. Behind a one-way mirror, CIA agents sat watching, documenting every moment as these men spiraled into hallucinogenic confusion. Even CIA operatives themselves were not safe. On November 19, 1953, Frank Olson, a scientist at the United States Army Biological Warfare Laboratories, was administered LSD during a CIA retreat at Deep Creek Lake in Maryland. He returned home a changed man. Olson became withdrawn. He barely ate, refused to speak about his work, and confided in his wife with cryptic messages, stating, quote, "I've made a terrible mistake." The disorientation followed Olson back to work, where his colleagues noted his erratic behavior. Concerned, the CIA arranged for him to return home under the supervision of a coworker. When Olson arrived home, he justified the situation to his wife, saying, quote, "They're afraid I might hurt you." Plans were made to send Olson to New York for psychiatric treatment with Dr. Harold Abramson, a CIA-connected physician. Yet this attempt to help Olson would go nowhere. In the early hours of November 28th, Olson plunged from the 13th floor of his hotel room window. Whether he fell or was pushed remains an unresolved mystery. Years later, the hotel manager reflected on the strange incident, stating, quote, "In all my years in the hotel business, I never encountered a case where someone got up in the middle of the night, ran across a dark room in his underwear, avoiding two beds, and dove through a closed window with the shade and curtains drawn." Mind erasure. As horrifying as the LSD experiments were, these were but a fraction of the sort of obscure operations the CIA set in motion as part of MKUltra. At the Allen Memorial Institute in Montreal, renowned psychiatrist Donald Ewan Cameron conducted some of the program's most terrifying experiments, pioneering a technique he labeled as psychic driving. Cameron's mission was to erase the essence of a person's identity, reducing them to a blank slate ready for reprogramming. The process began with drug-induced sleep, pushing patients into unconsciousness for days or even weeks. During this chemically enforced coma, Cameron subjected his victims to ruthless electroshock therapy, administering currents far beyond medical norms. But the true nightmare of psychic driving lay in its psychological torture. Cameron devised loop recordings, monotonous, inescapable phrases designed to shatter the mind. Messages like, "My mother hates me," or "I am worthless," were played for up to 20 hours a day, endlessly drilling into the subconscious. To ensure there was no escape, speakers were embedded under pillows or strapped into helmets, forcing patients to endure the cruel messages non-stop. In addition to psychic driving, MKUltra also explored the depths of sensory deprivation, a method aimed at breaking subjects' personalities and inducing complete suggestibility. People were entombed in sealed, dark environments. Their hands were tied, and white noise was played in a loop to ensure the total removal of sensory input for months on end. The effects of these experiments were inhuman, leaving survivors in a state of irreparable psychological damage. Years later, one victim of Cameron's techniques recalled, quote, "There's so much I couldn't remember after I got out at the Allen. When my family came, I was a zombie. I didn't even know who they were." No one is safe. MKUltra carried on for decades until the program was abruptly terminated in the early 1970s amidst the fallout of the Watergate scandal. In the purge of official documents that ensued, any possibility to understand the full extent of the experiments carried out against unsuspecting civilians was lost forever. Yet the story didn't end there. The agency's fascination with the human mind and its vulnerabilities persisted. In 1976, the quest to decode the brain's mysteries led Dr. Barry Jacobs to conduct further studies on the effects of LSD, this time not on humans, but on cats. At Princeton University, Jacobs subjected the animals to aerosolized LSD in transparent containers, while observers documented the unfolding scenes. Through the clear walls, they watched as cats were introduced to enclosures containing pairs of mice. Initially, the cats behaved like natural predators, stalking with calculated precision and striking without failure. But as the invisible mist of LSD filled the enclosures, their behavior transformed entirely. The cats began displaying erratic movements, leaping at unseen threats, their pupils dilating as they reacted to imperceptible stimuli. Most striking was their response to the mice. The once confident hunters now retreated in apparent terror when their natural prey approached, demonstrating how thoroughly the substance could dismantle even the most fundamental instincts. Human experiments had previously delivered similar results. At the Edgewood Arsenal, Army scientists administered LSD to soldiers, documenting its effects in a now infamous footage. Troops seemed to lose all sense of discipline, laughing uncontrollably, saluting the wrong officers, and stumbling aimlessly. A narrator, describing the scenes, remarked, quote, "They have ceased to be alert, but have become relaxed and carefree. They cannot control the impulse to laugh." The CIA's ambitions reached an even stranger climax with Project Acoustic Kitty, an attempt to turn cats into living covert recording devices. CIA scientists surgically implanted microphones, transmitters, and antennas into live cats. A transmitter was embedded at the base of the skull, a microphone concealed in the ear canal, and a fine wire antenna was woven through the fur and tail to maintain a natural appearance. The objective was to create a stealthy operative that could slip into sensitive areas undetected, capturing conversations between unwitting targets. But the reality was something else entirely. Former CIA assistant Victor Marchetti described the project bluntly, stating, quote, "They made a monstrosity." The challenges were massive. Engineers struggled to miniaturize the equipment while keeping the cats mobile and inconspicuous. Training cats to follow commands proved a fool's errand. After years of experimentation and a $20 million investment, the first field test ended in failure. Released near a park where two targets were engaged in conversation, the trained acoustic kitty could barely advance before it was struck by a taxi. Years of work and millions of dollars were destroyed in an instant. The future of mind control. As the decades passed, the public memory of extremist experiments like those conducted under MKUltra began to fade. Yet in recent years, advancements in brain-computer interfaces, or BCIs, have reignited discussions about the once fantastical notion of remotely controlling the human mind. These devices, capable of interpreting neural activity through electrodes or sensors, have already reshaped the boundaries of human potential. BCIs now empower paralyzed individuals to control robotic limbs, enable communication through mere thought, and even allow people to play games with their minds. As the divide between mind and machine blurs, so too does the line between therapeutic innovation and exploitation. BCIs are no longer limited to simple commands. They can now decode complex mental states, including emotions, attention levels, and cognitive decisions. Such advancements open the path to potential misuse. In 2019, photos from Jiangnan Experimental School showed Chinese students wearing headbands equipped with BCIs to monitor their attention in real time. The devices reportedly fed live data to teachers who could instantly see which students were focused and which were distracted. Meanwhile, the U.S. Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency has begun to delve into a program aimed at narrative persuasion and behavior modification. The agency explored how stories influence the brain on a neural level, using transcranial magnetic stimulation to attempt to alter how individuals process narratives. While these projects were framed as tools to counter terrorism and extremist ideologies, the notion of a government capable of directly influencing how civilians process information is far from reassuring. As these technologies keep evolving, memories of the MKUltra days are resurfacing. However, today's tools are far more sophisticated, capable of penetrating deeper into the mind and manipulating it with a precision that Sidney Gottlieb and his team could only dream of.